Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure again to resume our sessions today with session number 2, entitled The Role of Islamic Finance in Establishing Sustainable Supply Chains and Ensuring Food Security in Muslim-majority countries. Main topics of this session will include challenges within current food supply chains in Muslim-majority countries and the limitations posed by conventional financing methods. Also, among the topics, we will have strategies for integrating Islamic finance principles into the agricultural and food production sectors to enhance resiliency and sustainability. The role of Islamic finance or social and commercial microfinance instruments in supporting food security initiatives and promoting sustainable agriculture. The need for collateral management and electronic warehousing setups to support and streamline the food supply chains. The role of technology and digitalization in enhancing supply chain transparency and traceability. The importance of collaboration between financial institutions, agribusinesses, and policymakers in advancing food security and sustainable practices. Also, we will have topics like ensuring equitable access to financing and resources for smallholder farmers to boost their participation in the food supply chain, and potential for multinational Islamic financial institutions in initiating strategic relationships between stakeholders in their respective jurisdictions. May I invite to the floor Mr. Chairman, Honorable Dr. Ashrat Hussain, former Chairman of AYUFI Governance and Ethics Board, Kingdom of Bahrain, and former Governor, State Bank of Pakistan in Pakistan. Please, Dr. Ashrat. The mics, please. Our session will feature distinguished panelists, Dr. Sayyid Nazim Ali, Director of Research Division and Center of Islamic Economics and Finance, College of Islamic Studies, Hammad Bin Khalifa University in Qatar, Dr. Bello Lawal Danbatta, member of AYUFI Accounting Board, Kingdom of Bahrain, and former Secretary General of IFSB Malaysia, and Dr. Yahya Alimur Rahman, Global Lead Islamic Finance Advisory Knowledge Solutions, Islamic Development Bank, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and last but not least, Dr. Khalid Khalifa, Senior Advisor on Islamic Philanthropy, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, United Arab Emirates. Please, sirs.
And most of the exports of Muslim countries, major Muslim countries, and also minor Muslim countries are also derived from agriculture sector. And agriculture sector, if the incomes go up, is also the market for the consumer goods produced by the urban areas. So not only from the food security point of view, but for improved income standards of living, poverty reduction, removal of urban-rural disparities, agriculture plays a very important role. And that's why this topic, how to integrate Islamic finance into the production, distribution of agriculture and food products becomes important. I give you the example of my own country, where my expectation when I started Islamic finance as the governor in 2001 was that the conventional banks are not paying much attention towards the agriculture lending. Most of their lending was to the corporate sector, trading, high net worth individuals, or commercial. Because of its nature, Islamic finance is supposed to be equitable. My expectation was that these neglected sectors, including the SME, the low-cost housing, the mortgage financing, would receive attention and resources from Islamic banks, but that's not the case. After 23 years, they are only getting 11.5% of the total private sector lending from Islamic banks. And conventional banks are doing the same. They are almost 15%. So my proposal to the Islamic banks is that you have to behave differently from the conventional banks in order to stick to the principles which the equitable distribution of start with the first speaker, which is Mr. Yahya Alimur Rahman. He's the global lead of the Islamic Finance Advisory Knowledge Solutions at Islamic Development Bank. And I would request him to talk about the concept of the food security and the initiatives which the Islamic Development Bank has taken in order to help the countries of the member countries of the Islamic Development Bank overcome some of these problems of food insecurity.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. Can we have the presentation, please? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me start first and foremost by thanking IOFI for providing this opportunity to speak on this very important topic of food security. As we know, food security is as old as humanity itself. There's been evidence of silos and storage of grain. There was reference made to in the Quran. How food needs to be preserved. Now, generally, when people talk about food security, it's the common understanding is it's just about the availability of food. But a more comprehensive definition of food security is that safe and nutritious food to meet the requirements and the preferences to be able to live an active and healthy life. So if we deconstruct that definition, it's not just about the availability. If you can move to the next slide, please. There are certain elements to food security. The first is availability. So obviously food has to be grown, it has to be available, and this it has to be distributed. But just the availability of food is not sufficient. People need to have a physical and economic access to it as well. And physically means that it has to be available in their location, income and the means to access and buy that. Now that requires an entire network of availability from farm to market. It means that there has to be transportation, it means there has to be storage, and there has to be a market where it can be fairly traded and be accessed. Beyond that, utilization is also very important. So you may have availability and access, but how do you actually use the food and to ensure that it is safe and it has the appropriate nutritional value that is required. And last but not least is the stability, because given the volatility that happens in the markets due to man-made and natural disasters, to ensure that in the times of turmoil and uncertainty, the food is still available at a reasonable price and in reasonable quantities. Next slide, please. Now, we all know that food security has become one of the paramount issues and challenges in our times. And this is driven by numerous factors. And of course, I do the exhaustive list right now. But one of the key poverty can be due to lack of income, lack of financial resources. But this means that even when food is available, people do not have the ability to access that food. And these factors are interlinked. So a lot of the poverty is coming not only from the lack of economic development, but also conflict. So we see that we live in a time of civil unrest, of political uncertainty, of war, of genocide, and you can see that the Muslim IDB member countries are disproportionately affected by conflict, and that is leading to displacement, to the destruction of sources of food, and that. Similarly, there are natural factors that contribute to food insecurity as well, such as floods, droughts, and storms. And again, that is linked to the next factor, which is climate change, which is resulting in extreme weather events where we see, floods, unseasonal weather changes which destroy crops, and as a result of that, result in a lack of food availability and shortages. I'm not going to go into too much detail for this because the lack of time. And next slide, please. Next slide. So just to put some numbers around what's happening, and I'm going to go through this very quickly. So in 2022, there were 282 million people in 59 countries that were suffering from acute food insecurity and they required assistance. Next slide, please. And if you look at the countries which were suffering from acute food insecurity, you will see that in the list of countries, there are a lot of countries from sub-Saharan Africa, and a lot of these countries belong to the IDB member countries. And also there are 281 million people who are suffering from food insecurity. And if you go through the list, you can see that the member countries, for numerous reasons which I mentioned earlier, have been facing. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, when it comes to food insecurity, the segment of society that gets most acutely influenced by it are women and children. As you can see, there's about 72, 73 million children which were suffering some form of malnourishment and had due to food insecurity. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think you missed one slide. Go back. Yes. Next. And one of the things that was mentioned by Dr. Ishrat in his introduction is that one of the key hallmarks of our times is the increased escalation and protracted conflicts and climate change events and hardship. And that has resulted in refugees, asylum seekers, displaced people, and people which are displaced within their own countries. And you can see that there's millions and millions of people that are now very much exposed to food insecurity, in addition to other forms of inability to access healthcare, education. But basic nutrition is becoming a global phenomenon. The numbers are just to give an example that this is a global issue which is disproportionately affecting developing countries and the IDB member countries. Next slide, please.
Now, the IDB, as you know, is a multilateral development institution which is based on a unique model of South-South cooperation. Now, the IDB is also unique in the sense that it is the only multilateral development bank which sees Islamic finance as one of its key strategic pillars, and it focuses on using Islamic finance as a means to an end to achieve sustainable development goal. Now, I know that my colleagues are going to talk about the different modes of Islamic finance and their relevance to food security, but we feel that from the creation of safety nets through Islamic social finance, through zakat and sadaqah and waqf, to providing Islamic microfinance to small farmers and smallholders, to supporting the SME industry, to creating the infrastructure that is needed for access from farms to cities and towns and ports, to providing the trade finance services which is required for the import of food materials, to supporting the agriculture sector in terms of fertilizer, in terms of access to technology, Islamic finance, and to support services that can play a very critical role in providing food security to the member countries. Next slide, please. In fact, the new strategy, the IDB group strategy, is based on two pillars, of which one is the green, resilient and social infrastructure. And the relevance of that is that there is a renewed focus within the group to financing agriculture and rural development interventions and projects. And the second pillar, which is focusing on inclusive human capital development, and these are aligned with the sustainable development goals of low poverty. Next slide, please. So, in the wake of the allocated $10.5 billion to address the issue of food insecurity.
And this was supposed to be channeled both in the short and immediate term and in the medium term.
So in the short term, there was emergency food and input supply that was required for countries that were affected by COVID, and to provide the social protection and livelihood support. And in the medium term, the rural livelihood, resilience to climate shocks, ensuring that supply systems and other agricultural subsectors were supported. Next slide, please. And this is just not an initiative and an announcement. In fact, I'm happy to report that as of 31st August 2024, 68.5% of the pledged amount have actually translated into approved projects. And as you can see, this is not an effort just by the IDB, but it was a group coalition. So the IDB group, 2.2 billion was approved by the IDB. There was 24.1 million approved by the Islamic Solidarity Fund for Development. And I would like to make a point here that Dr. Ishaq was instrumental in setting up the Islamic Solidarity Fund for Development. Please go back to the previous slide. Previous. One back. And not only was it done through the entities, but also in terms of providing the political cover, in terms of insurance was provided by Isaac, and we ensured that the disbursement was fast-tracked. So 3.3 billion out of the 4.6 billion that was approved was actually disbursed by the Trade Finance Corporation to ensure that the funds are available and they are made available to the member countries to address the immediate and pressing needs about food security. Next slide, please. Now, to give you an idea of where these funds went, so this was not just an announcement of an approval or an announcement of a fund. As you can see, there were 24 projects that were actually approved, and you can see the list. I'm not going to go through the list, but these focus on different aspects of food security in terms of the value chain development, in terms of providing food security support, in terms of soil fertility, livestock development, and the list of projects goes on. So 4 of these were in Asia, 3 were in Middle East, North Africa, and Latin America, and 17 projects approved in Sub-Saharan Africa. So these are projects that have already been approved and are already in progress in different IDB member countries as of 31st August 2024. Next slide, please. Now, beyond the immediate short-term and long and medium-term initiatives, the IDB Institute has also embarked on a flagship initiative looking at how we can look at the idea of the autonomy zone is to build scalable, sustainable sources of socio-economic support by creating autonomy zones in member countries, and they would enjoy protected status, and they would and water security, and it will be enabled technologies such as blockchain, AI, and IoT. And the idea is that you don't only benefit the member countries in which these autonomous zones are created, but would also benefit short, medium, and long-term initiatives that the IDB has taken. Next slide, please. So, next slide. So the final thoughts are that given the magnitude and scale and IDB continues to do that. We're working with the World Bank, with other multilateral development banks, with the agencies of the UN and other partners in a collaborative manner to address these challenges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Mr. Yahya just informed us through the data that 90 million people are displaced in the conflicts, in internal turmoil, and for very other reasons. And that's a very large proportion of the people who are food insecure. So we have somebody who is dealing with this practically. Dr. Hammad Khalifa is a senior advisor on Islamic philanthropy for United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and he would share his thoughts as to how this particular vulnerable group of refugees and displaced persons is being taken care of. Dr. Khalifa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
States of the OIC, the member states of IDB, 52%. So we have the lion's share of the problems. But those people do not live of displacement.
You feel that the Muslim world is doing great. Islamic finance is booming. We have reached $4.9 trillion. Some reports say that the wealth with Muslims now equal $28 trillion, which is actually a very reasonable figure if we say that the size of the world economy is 100 trillion. Muslims are about 25%, so 28 trillion could be a reasonable figure. But this is not the reality on the ground. The Muslim world is actually becoming worse and worse as we speak. Politically, most of the problems that we are talking about are caused by conflict. So I would appeal to you, brother, to change the order of the problems. Conflict is the number one driver of displacement. 80 to 85% of the whole caseload, they actually come from conflict-stricken countries. Gaza is not a natural disaster. Yemen is not a natural disaster. Sudan is not a natural disaster. We are talking about man-made, human-made disaster. We speak about financial tools. Yes, Islam has financial tools that can address major problems in the world. We speak about zakat alone. According to the Islamic Development Bank, a few years ago, the survey that was made estimated zakat that should circulate globally between 350 billion to 550 billion. First, less than 10% of that materializes on the ground. Second, if this is accounted for and implemented, you wouldn't find a poor person in the whole Muslim world. Actually, zakat alone can respond to all the humanitarian problems in the world, not only in the Muslim world. How much does the humanitarian system need in 2024 to respond to all the needs in the world? We need 56 billion. $56 billion. If zakat alone is 350 billion, it means all the needs in the world can fit 7 times within zakat if it is done right, but it's not. There is a big issue. So I'm appealing to fellow speakers to match reality with research or reality in certain countries. I think, yes, the Muslim economy is booming. Yes, the Muslim finance or Islamic finance is doing great, but we have an equity issue. There are countries that are left behind. And I was asked to highlight a little bit about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. What kind of sustainable development goals can we speak about in a place like Gaza? What kind of SDGs are we talking about in Lebanon now? What kind of SDGs are we talking about in Sudan? In Yemen? There are only 2 probably countries in the whole world that were or still is on the verge of famine. Both of them are Muslim countries, Yemen and Sudan. And famine has a very strict definition in our terminology. We have 13 countries in the OIC member states who are fragile states, about to become failed states. What kind of SDGs are we talking about here? There are, if we speak about SDG 16, the goal when it comes to peace and justice. So I'm just appealing to researchers and speakers to sometimes also think of the reality. Yes, what is happening in certain sectors is great, but we cannot generalize it. We need to make sure that vulnerable groups like refugees, who are, according to our research, 4 times more vulnerable than the poorest people in certain areas, are not forgotten. If we speak about banking, I would say 90% or even more of refugees are not bankable, let alone creditable. If you are a refugee, you cannot even open a bank account. You do not have access to land. So, and that's more than 1% of people in the world. What kind of empowerment are we talking about? What kind of livelihood? To have livelihood, you need to be legal in certain areas. You need to have papers. You need to be recognized. If we are still talking about 4.5 million people who are stateless, they do not have a nationality. The largest population of them are Muslims, the Rohingya, more than 1.2 million who do not have a nationality. They do not exist to the world. To conclude, and I apologize because I will have to run to the airport after my intervention. I would have loved to stay to take some questions. We started to experiment with Islamic philanthropy tools, and we use Islamic philanthropy here as a model. To conclude the point about the SDGs, when we were asked to use Islamic philanthropy for the SDGs, I was the first person to say no. I don't think Islamic finance is the solution. We need annually, if we are to meet the SDGs by 2030, we need $4 trillion. That's already the size of the Muslim economy. And after everything has failed, we cannot dump the problem on financial institutions in the Muslim world. Islamic finance as a model could be the solution, yes, but not Islamic finance as institutions. I think this is very, very unfair to expect Muslim financial institutions to solve the problems that everybody else failed to respond to. In UNHCR, we established a Zakat fund for refugees that is 100% Sharia compliant, and I dare say, being the person managing this, it is even more compliant than many Muslim organizations. A Sharia committee, an interest-free bank account in the United Nations. We waived all the administration fees, reached until now, alhamdulillah, $250 million in collection and the distribution, 29 countries, 8.5 million beneficiaries in the Muslim world alone. We just also established our first Waqf for refugees with the Islamic Development Bank. We are hoping to reach $500 million. We already have now in the box $110 million, and it is generating income. It is based on a temporary Waqf. After 10 years, the money goes back to the donors as if we took a Qard Hasan to use it for 10 years and then return. This proves that Islamic finance as a model can help respond to problems that we face in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid, for depicting the real situation of the conflict-ridden countries. And I totally agree with you. These are man-made disasters. They are not natural disasters. People haven't been hurt so much by natural disasters as by man-made. And all of these examples show the importance of the poor segments are not really just what we call as the nationals living in a country, but the people who have actually been displaced from the countries, have no documentation, have no legal status, and cannot earn a decent livelihood. So I think you make a very important point. But Islamic finance is not a very homogeneous product or an array of products. It has several dimensions. And one of the dimensions which can really help the poor, and my own experience has shown that it reaches out to the bottom of the pyramid, is the social finance and the microfinance. And I would very much like Dr. Nazim to talk about how the Islamic social and commercial microfinance instruments can support food security initiatives and promote sustainable agriculture. Dr. Nazim.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, it's very important that you know where you left, and I can start from there. This is zakat. I know the Indonesia's case, Basnas has distributed the zakat. But the question is that, how do we collect those $350 billion zakat? That's the billion-dollar question actually we have. I mean, the money is there, but how this is going to be collected and how it's going to be distributed. And I'm glad the UNDP is doing that work. And then you mentioned that we are finding it also. They are not overheads at all. But before we go into this, especially one of the instruments that I would like to concentrate is microfinance. So let's look at the current, food security landscape in Muslim majority countries. Still, I believe I've seen that 70% of the supply is being imported actually from outside. So this dependency creates an vulnerability and exposes these countries to supply chain issues and price fluctuations and other prices. So agriculture, can we have first slide please? Agriculture productivity in these countries is often low, and farmers face several challenges and limited access to modern technology, and supply chain are fragmented. This makes it harder to produce enough food locally. Next slide, please. Okay. The food security. Okay, the food security is essential for economic stability, as you all know. When people have reliable access to food, they are healthier and more productive, and supply chains, and then they work hard and they produce more. This is less actually for the healthcare as well, for associated. Ultimately, the food security helps creating a stronger economy and supports growth. So beyond the economy, the food security is crucial for social stability and consistency. Access to food reduces disparities and promotes social cohesion. So when food access is unequal, tension can rise, which can lead to unrest. That's why it is vital for government to prioritize the food security. So when we look at the rural areas, like as Professor Dr. Ishaq Hussain mentioned, there's a lot actually in the rural areas and the urban areas. The rural areas of food security is predominantly, it's in the hands of these farmers. So in many Muslim majority countries, small farmers often lack access to necessary resources, such as farming tools, irrigation, and good quality seeds. So strengthening support for farmers, especially smallholders, is essential. When farmers can access the right tools and resources, they can produce more, reducing the needs for imports. So here is where the microfinance will come into existence, play a role. So we all know the microfinance offers an Shariah-compliant funding for sustainable agriculture, encouraging ethical practices, and this is involves in a social responsibility, and it improves the living standards of the human beings if the farmer gets involved in producing the food, and this also helps in poverty relations and sustainability, sustainable development. The tools that we know that the microfinance has tailored are Fard Hassan, benevolent loan, and Murabaha, Mudaraba, and Musharaka. These are the tools that we have been seeing that they have been quite often used and for the last 30 years. So if we look at the case studies of some of those there are three case studies that I have here. One is the Indonesian Baitul Mal, Tamil. This is a Fard Hassan model that they have used, and they have given the loan to the small farmers. They have improved agricultural productivity by 15 to 20%, and an increase in income stability by 10 to 15%. These interest-free loans enables access to vital inputs like seeds and equipment, enhancing community resilience and food security. And the other model that I have is from Pakistan, Upward Foundation in Pakistan. This is also a very interesting model, and it has distributed over 10 billion rupees in micro loans, and supporting farming equipment purchases and empowering female entrepreneurs. So this initiative boosts food security and encourages women-led businesses, contributing to household resilience and economic empowerment. Last year, the founder of the Quad was here in the conference 2 years ago, and we are heading, and this is a very, very successful model in Pakistan. And the last the example that I have here is Irada, this microfinance in Sudan, has financed over 10,000 farmers, increasing in crop yields by 15 to 20% and reducing post-harvest losses. Again, this movement promotes financial inclusion, supporting sustainable food supply chains and enhancing food security in Sudan. There are many, of course, the last one is supported by the Bank of Khartoum, but there are also quite a number of banks also provide microfinance loans, Shariah-compliant microfinance loans to farmers. So they are in different countries. The role of stakeholders. So this is very important. I mean, if we provide the Sharia-compliant access finances through the microfinance, which enables farmers to invest in seeds and tools and sustainable practices, improving yields and food security by ensuring a more abundant food supply. And the integration with supply chain is another important aspect. The microfinance helps small farmers integrate into larger supply chains, reducing inefficiencies and food waste, leading to a more stable food supply for consumers. And the policymakers, by establishing supportive regulations and incentives, policymakers can encourage microfinance institutions to focus on agriculture directly, impacting food security by making Sharia-compliant funding more accessible. The financial institutions are essential in designing microfinance products like Fard Hassan and Mudaraba and Murabaha, and enabling farmers to invest in sustainable practices without financial strain. And NGOs and community organizations can also play an important role educating the farmers, especially with regard to crops, and when they have been attacked by any insects, so they can share that knowledge, and they can help through the extension workers to remedy those situations. And that's a very critical role, educating the farmers on sustainable practices and financial literacy. And the local governments support Islamic microfinance through infrastructure improvements, reducing post-harvest losses, and facilitating market access for small farmers. And that's very, very crucial. Of course, there are challenges. Right now, there is a limited awareness among the farmers. So many farmers lack knowledge of Islamic finance options. They limit their ability to benefit from the microfinance services. So this is something very important that
we have to do that so that they will be aware that there is where they are not able to do that.
And supply chain gaps also there. And effective microfinance requires strong supply chains to maximize productivity
and food security. And SRIs and others, a global shift Islamic finance institute and attracting funds for sustainable agriculture. And technological innovations are also another advantage, like mobile banking and digital platforms facilitate microfinance access, enhancing productivity and food security. And collaborative partnership with the multi-stakeholders partners can create innovative solutions to address farmers' needs and enhance the food security. The last slide, I just wanted to show you that yesterday I was going through the JDN, Gulf Daily News, so I saw this news call for stepping up food security efforts. This is the efforts that there is a Bahrain representation to this meeting in which they talk about the food security. So these are the few findings that I have about the role of the social finance and hopefully for the food security.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nazim. I think Islamic microfinance has not really taken off as much as the rest of the Islamic finance. And one of the questions I have always been asking is, what is the major hurdle as Islamic microfinance is lagging behind? And it is the administration cost. Between the cost of borrowing the money and on lending to the customers, almost 10 percentage points are taken away by administration. And that is not viable for the repayment capacity of the small farmers. And therefore, technological innovation where onboarding and all the services are providing through the digital platform, through the mobile banking, is the only way out to reduce the administrative costs and therefore increase the outreach. And I think this is something which you might be able to explore further. If there are some examples of successful penetration through this means, I would very much like you to add to your presentation. Thank you very much. Dr. Bello is a very old friend and a person who just completed his term as the head of the Secretary General of the Islamic Financial Services Board. So he has a very wide experience. And I requested him to talk about two things. One is the importance of collaboration between the financial institutions, agribusinesses, policymakers. And secondly, we have all been talking about how to ensure equitable access to financing for smallholder farmers, because the gap between the smallholder farmer and the medium farmer is almost 50 to 60%. So if you're able to move the escalation only by 10 to 20% and reduce this gap, the countries can become, surplus in their food production. So that is the question I wanted to pose to you because of your wide experience.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I know it is indeed a challenging session, and I think that's why the idea of IOP for this panelists to have both visual and listening engagement. That's why most of the speakers, we have slides so that we keep you awake, we communicate with you. I thank IOP and ISDB as the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be part of this important conference. It is indeed a timely one, especially the topic that we are talking about today. I have also a few points that I would like to share. I want to emphasize and corroborate the point made by Dr. Khalid. If any one of you has read the GFSI reports 2022, which was issued last year, you will be worried. You will be really concerned that for the 3 consecutive years, the global food security has been deteriorating due to a number of reasons, and particularly for the Muslim countries. And the conclusion in that report was that there is an increased risk of armed conflict, as just mentioned by the UNHCR, Dr. Khalid, and the soaring food prices due to the increase in inflation, as well as other challenges that are facing our economies. And they conclude as well that we need to manage our natural resources, particularly we are talking about land and water, due to the consideration of the extreme weather conditions as well as the rising temperature that is happening around the globe. Now, in that particular report, if you look at the disturbing issue is that at the top 20, those countries that scored the top 20 who were rated, no single Muslim country in this out of 113 countries that they have rated. Not a single one. The nearest one that came is 23rd and 24th, which is Saudi Arabia and Qatar. UAE and Qatar. Saudi Arabia and Malaysia make the list after UAE and Qatar. Oman made 35, and then we have Saudi Arabia and Malaysia being 41st position. It's quite disturbing. Majority of the rest of the Muslim countries are actually below the scale, and which is really a concern to all of us. And that's why I believe the issue of food security is something that is very timely and is something that we need to spend more time to discuss it. And in that report, they also concluded that more investment is needed in agriculture, particularly with regards to R&D. And actually, we, the Muslim countries, we need this more. The GMOs, that is the genetically modified seeds that are being supported or presented by Corteva and other international agroscience companies, we have some concern based on experience and experimental of these seeds in certain jurisdictions. So that's why the Muslim economies, the Muslim countries need to step up efforts in terms of managing the food security that is facing us. The risk is really enormous, and for us to contend this risk, it requires everybody's attention. I believe in this whole we are all farmers, but plate farmers, not land farmers. Plate farmers in the sense that we all eat food. We eat on the plate, but if we are to take an inventory in this hall, how many sincerely own farms and do farming in this room? You will be surprised, Your Excellency. If you go outside to your neighborhood in your respective localities, you may count 20 houses. Out of these 20 houses, if you are lucky, you will have maybe like 2 or 3 houses that really have real farmers that are contributing to the food security or the food crisis issue. So the food supply or food security issue is everybody's business, and I will dwell a little bit more on that. Now, based on The Economist, which they conducted this annual study together with Corteva annually, The Economists do this. They come up with these 5 criteria as consideration for food security. They look at availability, affordability, quality and safety of the food, and then sustainability and adaptation, as well as the food security environment. Majority of the issues that we have with refugees is more on the food security environment, because you cannot even think or ask someone that is a refugee to farm. He doesn't have the peace of mind. So definitely the environment is being exposed. So the refugees issue is actually one out of the 5 criteria that The Economist is actually looking at. Now, each of these criteria has a number of parameters for which we will be able to measure the food security component. When we are talking about affordability, we are talking about the per capita income of the country, we are talking about the food consumption as a share of expenditure of the household, quite a number of issues. And then the price speculations. When we are talking about the food availability, sometimes in the locality, in certain countries that are members actually of the OIC, who are members also of the ISDB, if you get to the grassroots, you will be shocked that the only investment by the Islamic financial institutions is actually to go to the market when it is time for harvest. They buy some of these foods and they circulate or they hoard it, and then when the prices goes up, and then they sell them at the market, and they consider this as an investment in agriculture.
It's one of the common practice. And likewise, this is what others are doing in terms of the hoarding activities, which is against the Sharia. So we have these kind of issues at the grassroots. When you are talking about the sustainability of the food security, a number of initiatives can be initiated by many countries, but there are a number of challenges. The import tariffs of certain food processing equipment, or even the fertilizers, or even the equipment that we use for the agriculture, is actually very high. That really set up kind of challenge in ensuring that the food is actually, the food production is actually sustainable in that jurisdiction, even if there is no conflict. So there is quite a number of issues that we need to really look at when we are talking about food security, and it's everybody's business. Let me just perhaps share an experience that we are currently having. After my term in IFSB, I was concerned about the report which I read. Actually, I read this particular report last year, and we come up with an initiative with some group of friends, and then we funded this AgroVest initiative. What we try to do is to go to the locality and the community. We work with the government. We acquire 250 hectares of land. We come up with a cluster of farmers, about 120 of them, and each one of them we do engage them based on Musat, Amugara, and so on, based on Islamic concept, and we get to start working with them for them to harvest individually and let's see, but on condition that whatever is the harvest, 2/3 of it will be used for consumption, not for resale, not for cash. Why? We want to make sure that the farmers actually, what they produce, they have this security of food. They don't sell it out, or they don't allow someone to come and buy all this food produce, and then they leave them with some cash, and then they jack the prices up. At the end, the cash will not be enough for them to buy the food again in the market. So this is one of the things that we have at AgroVest. Another thing is we introduce also community gardens. We look at 20 communities, and then each one will ensure that there is a garden. We provided the land, We ask in some jurisdictions, I mean, in some areas that some of those that have land, they volunteer, and then they come up with their youth among them. Maybe their children, some of them volunteer to participate themselves, and they work on this garden. Vegetables, like the daily need vegetables, and these are perishables, we ask them to grow, we give them the support. And then now they are actually producing this. Some of these food items, vegetables, they don't need to go to the market, but it's their own community. But who harvest and who work on the farms or in the gardens, they are the ones working on that. This is something that we are working on the ground. But coming back to the institutional food security issue, we need to look at the concern, the challenges that we have. Hence, whether Islamic financial system can effectively manage or help the Muslim countries to address the food insecurity is another area that we need to look at carefully. In most countries, there are no sufficient legal and regulatory frameworks that will give an incentive for the Islamic financial institutions to even venture, even if they want to do so, into the agricultural food production. There are no government incentives sufficient in some countries that are actually helping or motivating the financial institutions or the individual farmers to really even come forward. The IFI's risk appetite is a great concern in the sense that they don't have expertise and they don't want to go into agriculture due to a number of reasons, particularly moral hazards, natural disasters that can affect the harvest, which at the end of the day, the depositors' money will not be recovered. So these are some of the key concerns that really hinders the sustainability as well as the effectiveness of Islamic financial institutions to be able to manage the food security issue well, particularly in the Muslim countries, which we need to look into. Farmers and investors' capacity, they really need to understand there is a lot of sensitization that is needed, which is one of the things that in agribusiness that we are doing. For agribusiness, we currently focus in the northern part of Nigeria, and we are trying to expand the activities not only when we grow, not only in Nigeria, but also to neighboring West African countries, and then to globally. What we have is the farmers to understand their responsibility to food security. Nobody will come and provide food security for you. You have to provide it by yourself. But you need the enabling environment. You need to have the necessary infrastructure in place. You need to have the awareness. You need to have the understanding that this is your own business. It's your responsibility to make sure that the community that you live, we have so many hadiths, so many Islamic teachings and guidance that really force us to ensure that our neighbors don't even sleep with hunger, and we need to really work hard and make sure that we are relevant in our society. So we have the necessary infrastructure to enable Muslim countries develop independence when we are talking about food security. This is an issue that we need to discuss and we need to really look into. Now, the two questions that I've been asked regarding the collaboration between financial institutions, agribusinesses, and policy makers by the chairman, as well as ensuring equitable access to financing and resources for smallholder farmers, is actually a very important one. But who are we talking about need to collaborate? I believe Brother Yahya and Dr. Said has highlighted some of these issues and the need for this collaboration, but policymakers need to take the lead. They need to provide the enabling environment in which food security can be achievable. I believe, now I can say it because I'm no longer with the IFSB. I can feel free to maybe perhaps express my concern by some of these multilateral institutions that give support to some of our countries develop. Investors and look for this
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful session. Of course, it's a session that needs a lot more time than what we have, but I'm sure that it has provided some thought-provoking discussions, and inshallah, food for thought for us as we go back and continue to discuss these very, very enriching topics that we have, and that is of very, very important topic, food security. So I would like to thank you very much, respected panelists, of course, very, very ably chaired by Dr. Ishrat Hussain, former chairman of AOFI Governance and Ethics Board, and of course, former governor of State Bank of Pakistan. Dr. Syed Nazim Ali, thank you very much for for joining us. Dr. Bello, Brother Yahya, Alimur Rahman from Islamic Development Bank.